China's provinces are on the verge of bankruptcy, and it's causing some of them to employ some extreme measures to fill their empty coffers. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. China's local government debt is out of control. It's so insane that the Financial Times described it as an ulcer earlier this year. According to China's official numbers, total local government debt reached $12.6 trillion in 2022, equivalent to 76% of China's entire economic output that same year. It's also equal to more than 6 times the size of the Italian economy and more than 3 times the size of the Indian economy. So in other words, there's a lot of Chinese local debt out there. A lot. Not only that, but the 2022 debt is almost 14% higher than the debt numbers just 3 years ago, meaning it is a debt burden that has ballooned in recent years. I'm glad to see China has their own balloons to worry about. The situation is so dire that analysts have warned that regional governments could start declaring bankruptcy one after another, like Domino's, leaving them so destitute the only thing they can afford to eat is Domino's. But don't worry, while this might all sound bad, it might actually be much worse under the surface. For years, Chinese provincial governments were able to leverage different kinds of financial tools and shadow borrowing to get around budget and borrowing restrictions imposed by the central government. In a classic case of the government getting involved to fix a problem it caused and making things worse. In this way, combined with the sale of land to hungry Chinese developers, local governments were able to raise billions of dollars worth of capital to run their affairs and fund local projects. This led to a construction boom and a surge of development across China. What could go wrong? What's that? Why, it's the sound of their chickens coming home to roost. The problem was that developers and local governments were fueling all this development with an ever-growing accumulation of debt. When the central authorities intervened in 2020, the mountain of debt had reached a magnitude that posed a threat to the rest of the Chinese financial system. As of last year, it still posed a threat to China's economy. But since a lot of this debt derived from obscure financing like shadow borrowing, we don't actually know how much local government debt is out there. With some estimating there might be as much as $11 trillion of shadow debt, in addition to the $12.6 trillion we know about. On top of that, China just emerged last year from the central government's very expensive zero-COVID policy. Even though zero COVID was pushed by the CCP leadership, cities and provinces were the ones that had to pay for many of the draconian lockdowns and the rounds of mass testing that defined the policy, with one province spending $22 billion, yes, dollars, on the policy. So, local governments have come up with some creative ways of pulling in funding at the expense of the Chinese people. Let's look at some examples. In 2022, 4 local banks in Henan defrauded their customers a combined $4.2 billion, resulting in 600,000 people losing their life savings and, perhaps unsurprisingly, protests. Because, as it turns out, when you cheat people out of everything they worked their whole lives for, they tend to hold a grudge. Petty much? 2 years later, many of the victims of the scandal have still not been compensated. So in February, they protested again. But instead of hearing the protesters out or simply allowing them to protest, the local authorities reportedly rounded them up and took them away. Which probably shouldn't be surprising. This is communist China, after all. The largest case of fraud in communist China is still, of course, communism. Shocked it still hasn't fixed all their problems yet. To this day, more than 4 months later, some of them still have not been released from detention, with several standing accused of picking quarrels and provoking trouble, a catch-all phrase often used by these Chinese authorities to throw people in jail for basically doing anything they don't like. Yes, picking quarrels and provoking trouble. What are they going to make illegal next? Tomfoolery and roustabouting in the 3rd degree? The same phrase was used by local authorities in the southwestern Guizhou province when they detained an entrepreneur, also in February. The entrepreneur is allegedly owed 220 million yuan by the provincial government for failed development projects. But instead of being reimbursed, she was detained along with her legal team after refusing to settle the debt in return for only 12 million yuan. which sparked a public outcry. The problem is provinces simply don't have the money to pay her and others like her back. But they do have plenty of room in their jails. Iron bars are cheaper than gold bars, after all. In another recent case of economic misconduct, public utility providers in the central Chinese cities of Chongqing and Chengdu reportedly vastly overcharged their residential customers for natural gas in April. And back in April, local officials in China's Inner Mongolia region were caught on video prohibiting farmers from planting their crops unless the farmers first paid a massive fee. When the farmers threatened to call the police, one of the local officials reportedly said, "So what if officers arrive? The higher-ups ordered me to collect money, so that's what I'm going to do." You can see the higher-ups in the Chinese provinces are desperate to rake in money wherever they can find it. It's not just Chinese people that are feeling the bite of the money-starved provinces. Recently, Chinese companies have suddenly started to receive tax bills from local authorities dating back as far as the 1990s. In one of the most extreme cases, a petrochemical company in eastern China was ordered to pay what amounts to around $179 million in additional taxes, which led the company to suspend its production. With local governments drowning in debt, there have been even incidents of authorities launching financial raids into the jurisdiction of other provinces, a move that has become known as fishing the high seas. In one incident reported in April, local officials from a district in southern Guangdong province traveled to Wuhan in the central Hubei province to detain a number of people on charges of running an illegal gambling operation, although no evidence was reportedly presented on how a gambling company in another province was harming people in Guangdong. If only they were more concerned of other things that were going on in Wuhan that could have harmed them. Additionally, the Guangdong officials confiscated all the illegal gains of the gambling company, transferring the equivalent of more than $41 million to their own account back in Guangdong, which simultaneously bankrupted the Wuhan company. So we are basically seeing the debt crisis setting the stage for cases of outright lawlessness in China, perpetrated by local officials. As these examples demonstrate, China, under the rule of the Chinese Communist Party, is not exactly the land of justice for all. According to the World Justice Project, out of 142 countries, China was ranked among the 50 countries with the weakest adherence to the rule of law last year. China scored particularly badly in areas such as fundamental rights, criminal justice, and constraints on government power, leading Xi Jinping to think, that sounds like they're picking quarrels and provoking trouble. Lock them up. This is not particularly surprising stuff about modern-day China, where Chinese leader Xi Jinping's word is law. That's not hyperbole. They have literally written parts of Xi's speeches as well as his thoughts into law. The dynamic between the Chinese authorities and the rule of law was probably best explained by a CCP official back in 2017, when he reportedly told a villager whose house had been demolished that some things are driven by the government, not dealt with according to laws and regulations. In short, power supersedes the law. Sometimes you just gotta let the CCP explain Chinese state justice themselves. I would think fairness and justice would be more important, but I guess that's just propaganda stuffing my dumb Western brain. But despite the general lack of fair and impartial rule of law, the recent cases of financial injustice are still quite extreme even for China. And the cases have not escaped the notice of the Chinese people, many of whom are outraged at what they're witnessing. At the same time, they're also outraged at what they are experiencing on the financial front in their own lives. In fact, economic protests more than doubled in the last quarter of 2023 compared to the year before, with people throughout China taking to the streets to voice their anger. This included rallies by laborers over unpaid wages, demonstrations by property buyers whose apartments were never built, and protests by investors and retirees fleeced of their money despite police warning them not to protest. Doing business with China is such a bad idea that Chinese citizens shouldn't even do business with China. All of these developments seem to have been noted by the Chinese leadership, who are meeting later this month in Beijing, where the main topic will be a tax reform that will enable local governments to retain more fiscal revenues. It was the central government itself that laid the foundation of the current debt crisis with the fiscal reform in 1994 that took away local governments' abilities to independently raise money, which instead made them dependent on the financial tools and the land sales that have led to the current crisis. And it is far from certain whether the new reform will remedy the shortcomings of the old reform and at the same time fix China's debt crisis and prevent a slide into more lawlessness. If nothing changes, the spike in economic protests that we saw at the end of last year might only be the beginning of a growing popular dissatisfaction with the authorities' handling of economic matters. In the meantime, any top people in the CCP that happen to be running any gambling ventures in their provinces might want to check in on the operation from time to time in the near future. Just to be on the safe side. I'd hate to think of anyone there picking quarrels and provoking troubles, but you can provoke trouble by visiting hkleninwall.com and leaving a post-it note for Hong Kong. Doing this project and this whole show would not have been possible without the support of viewers like you. The crowdfunding website patreon.com/China Uncensored. You can contribute however much you want, but it could be even as little as $1 an episode. Every bit helps. It's what makes projects like the Digital Lenin Wall possible. And the CCP is taking notice. That's why Chinese state-run media has called China Uncensored disgraceful anti-China garbage. So join what I call the China Uncensored 50-cent army on Patreon. And as a thank you to everyone who gives on Patreon, I'll respond to one of your questions or comments at the end of these episodes. Today's comes from Lobo. So we are all on the CCP's hit list now? Cool, never been on a hit list before. So Lobo is responding to this news, that China has new guidelines that threaten the death penalty for Taiwan independence diehards. Now the crazy thing about this is that it technically applies to anyone, anywhere in the world. The CCP has been making laws like this more frequently lately. The Hong Kong national security law also technically applies to anyone, anywhere in the world. People often ask me why Americans should care about China. This is why. The CCP wants to be the global superpower, and they want to enforce their laws everywhere in the world. If they succeed, the whole world will be under their jurisdiction. So if you do something to anger the CCP, it wouldn't matter where you live. They could get you. I can't go to Hong Kong because I'm in violation of their stupid laws. I'm sure they'd also consider me a Taiwan independence diehard. This is why the CCP is a threat to everybody. Thanks for your question and your support, Lobo. Join Lobo on Patreon by clicking that orange button. And I also have another video I'd like you to watch. This one. I'm trying to get around YouTube censorship by hiding controversial topics in gaming content. In Elden Ring, Shadows of the Erd Tree, the world is run by aging political leaders who have been in charge forever and demand utter loyalty and faith in them while making the people of the land fight between themselves. Yeah, I wonder if there's anything to say about modern America. Just click here and check it out. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.